Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic.
We're back in the middle of November here, and hopefully everyone's been having a successful and fun-filled rut from the whitetail woods to the mule deer mountains, I guess. I hope that everyone's had a good season so far. So I'm a couple days late on releasing this podcast here. Just got back from Alberta in the bow zone with Jim Holt Jr. and Classic Outfitters and Sitka Gear. And also just finished up the Pennsylvania whitetail season, ended yesterday. So I flew back in from Alberta on Saturday, got in early Sunday morning, and went straight into hunting whitetails for the last day of the archery season in Pennsylvania. So I apologize for not releasing this on time, and those are just excuses that I'm using there. But anyways, here we are. The podcast is ready to go, and this one will be with Jim Holt Jr., who is the outfitter and head guide at Classic Outfitters up in the bow zone. So before we get into the podcast here with Jim, kind of wanted to give a little bit of an update and describe my experience without getting into too much detail on the hunt that Jim and I will talk about. But the bow zone was just such an unbelievable experience for me too. I've never hunted whitetails, anything like that. And first and foremost, I've never hunted with an outfitter before. So that had been a new situation for me. And it ended up being a great experience. I learned so much from Jim, and I'm sure everyone here will once you listen to this podcast. But the guy is just such a wealth of knowledge and a very disciplined whitetail hunter. And it shows in his success over the last 30-some years of guiding. So his clients have done very well as himself and his brother Doug have done just some unbelievable things as far as taking experienced world-class whitetails in the bow zone of Alberta. So the first day of the trip, I had my first, 15 minutes in the stand. I didn't get out to the evening because in the morning, went through some more training with Jim and had to prove that we could, climb the tree, hang a stand, and get set up, everything completely quiet without making any noise whatsoever before you're allowed to go out and hunt in the tree stand. And he does this not to be a pain on anybody or, try to make your experience not worthwhile. He does it because that's what you need to do to have an opportunity at these whitetails. It would be hard for me to believe it without experiencing it. I mean, what's so different about these deer than others? And I'm not really sure, but I'll tell you one thing. They are a very tough animal to get in close on. So to go forward here, first 15 minutes in the stand, I was just getting set up. I had my bow hanger screwed in, got my pack set up, got my layers on. I'm feeling good. And just kind of soaking in the fact that I'm actually, out of the United States. I'm in the upper part of Alberta hunting, these whitetails that I've dreamed about my whole life. And all of a sudden I hear, boom, here comes a doe kind of running through the woods. And not too far behind her, about 80, 100 yards behind her, here comes a buck. And right away I could tell this thing is a giant. And the doe came up, and I was worried because she was coming directly downwind of me. She kind of got a little bit skittish. She's, you could tell she's kind of being weary, but didn't pick me up. Walks out on the trail 25 yards. But right before that, actually, she came across this little opening. I ranged at 35 yards. I'm like, if this buck's coming the same trail, I'm going to take him right there. Anyway, she comes out to 25. And just kind of moseys on out towards the back of the alfalfa field, out of the thick stuff. And the buck continues to follow and comes up, and he hits that spot. He stops, and that what I thought was an opening at first at 35 yards So I'm getting ready to draw, and I'm looking. I'm like, I can't make that shot. I wasn't 100% confident I could make that shot. There was a few sticks. There's a couple branches that were in the way. There's a potential. That the opening where the vitals were was open. But the way the branches were laid, I'm pretty sure my arrow would have hit it at about 12 yards in front of me. These branches weren't like right in front of them. It was back out. So with the arc of the arrow and everything, I'm pretty sure I was going to hit it. And just opted not to shoot, to wait until he hit the next opening. I'm like, there's nothing to worry about. He'll hit that next opening. Well, I took another couple steps, and I think my wind was blowing that direction. I wasn't sure why the doe didn't pick me up, but he, being an experienced whitetail, picked me up. And he looks around the tree. It didn't look exactly up at me, but looked around and just bolted. And my heart sank. And I was trying to think, like, how big of a deer was that? So I was kind of guesstimating and again, I'm a Pennsylvania whitetail hunter here for the most part. So when I get to a deer that's over 170 inches, I have a tough time judging them. So I just said ballpark 175 to 180. Ended up seeing another really good deer that night and passed on like a 130-inch 8-point that came by. But I went back to camp and I started describing this deer, and they're like, what was he like? I said, he's a typical 12-point, big brow tines, knife bladed out, went straight out. The buck just, it's just super wide, and the whole package. And they're like, yeah, Bo, he was probably 190 inches last year. And that just made my heart sank. The fact that I probably had about a 200-inch whitetail at 35 yards, and I didn't capitalize on the opportunity, which it is what it is. The rest of the week was just an unbelievable experience. We had cold weather. It warmed up a little bit. We had freezing rain and sleet and hail and everything else that you could think of thrown at you. Perfect weather for testing new gear. So I can't wait to see when this stuff releases and be able to kind of talk to you guys about it. Awesome stuff to go through and test. So that was kind of the week there. I ended up having another buck come in on the last morning that I would have shot. It wasn't as big as the first one, but a very nice deer. He's following a doe, but didn't end up coming through range. And throughout the week, I passed on a lot of other good deer. It just wasn't happening yet. The full blown rut when you're seeing some of these really big deer running, chasing does and stuff is actually closer to Thanksgiving up there, just the way that it is in the northern hemisphere there. And yeah, so that was kind of tough there. We saw, like I said, saw a lot of good deer that I would have been more than happy to take in Pennsylvania, but just kind of wasn't what I was going to Alberta for. And also on the last morning, saw a cow moose that came through, which it was cool to be able to see that. But Jim's method to hunting these, as he dubs them, experienced whitetails, is in some way that, I don't know, it's something I'm gonna have to go back and do again. Like, it just, the fact that I didn't succeed at it makes me want to keep doing it. 2, it's just so difficult. Being silent was such a big part of it. And again, you'll hear a lot of this stuff in a lot more detail from Jim and why he does it that way. So let me jump into kind of the end of the Pennsylvania season. So where we left off on the last episode, it was Friday, November 2nd, I believe. And I came in on lunch just to record the podcast, the intro there, and get that released. So I didn't get to update anymore. Well, the next day of hunting before I left for Alberta was just dynamite. It just, everything changed. So I left here from recording a podcast, and normally that time of year I'm hunting all day sits, but I needed to get that podcast done before I left for Alberta. Go back out to where I was parking at, and there was 2 vehicles there. I said, how in 2 hours can 2 people show up on, a Friday afternoon? Well, they did. And the chances of them actually hunting in the same spot I was slim to none, but nonetheless, I don't like being around people, and I don't want to, mess them up in any way. So went to plan B, just pulled everything, went to a different spot, packed my stand in, went to an area I was planning on hunting the next morning, but decided to hunt it that evening. And right away got into some deer, some does hanging out, small bucks cruising through, and then it was action-packed. Right as it was getting dark, I heard a buck after I did a grunting sequence. It was just last light, and he's in the beech bushes tearing up a tree. And I'm trying to get him, so I was being a little more aggressive than normal, trying to get him out of that cover so I could get an opportunity to shoot him if he was a buck I wanted to shoot before dark. But as those big deer do, he stayed in the cover, and actually he snort wheezed at me 4 different times. Just full blown. And the one time I tried to do it back at him when I was trying to get him to come out before it got too dark. And I had trouble making that noise in my mouth because I was so excited that I don't know what it sounded like, but not a snort wheeze. And I just covered it up with like a long, deep growl of a grunt. And he just got him so fired up. He was tearing up trees, doing everything he could want. And I ended up getting to see that deer. Couldn't get like a real good view of his rack, but he was big. He was real nice. And he did a complete 270-degree loop around me, never coming out of the thick stuff, right to the base of my tree behind me. And while that's happening, another buck appears, and it's this big 8-point that I'd been watching. When I say watching, I'd seen him on my trail camera. And very big, mature deer. He's sitting there 17 yards, this time in the wide open. He walked over, hit where I'd walked in on the scent trail, and he must have caught something he didn't like, and just on a dime bolted. But up to that, if it would have been light enough, I could have shot him, 10 times over before that point. So just really good evening. I was pumped up getting out of there. I was stuck in the tree like an hour and 10 minutes after dark because I couldn't leave because I had deer around me, and got out. Went home, got a good night's sleep. Last morning, went out. Not a deer until I was getting out at noon. I believe it was 11:45 when I had a really big, probably 140 to 150 inch 10-point cruise out in front of me at about 55 yards or so. But he stayed in the thick stuff. And again, wouldn't leave, didn't care about any of my calls. He was on a trail, and he just kept going. So that was it. I climbed down, get ready to go pack for Alberta, and I was walking out to the trail, and I caught something over the rise. It looked like a turkey feather, and I kind of just ducked down. And the day before I'd spotted some turkeys walking in, so the next day I made sure I brought in my orange vest with me, so I wore it walking in and out along with my orange hat to meet the orange requirements in case I decided to shoot a turkey walking out. So, what do you know? I come across those turkeys. I kept my head down, kept ducked, drew my bow, stood up, and at that point they're about 15 yards, and I ended up shooting one of the young toms. So I shot a Jake and kind of ran away, went down over the hill. I snuck up on him like where he went, spotted him kind of bedded down next to a log. So I put another arrow in him, and actually the first one was a kill shot. He would have died there within probably a few more seconds, but decided to put another arrow in for good measure. And it was pretty cool to be able to do that. So got the turkey all, basically just threw him over my shoulder with my pack and my stand, a whole bunch of weight, packed out, got to my truck, cleaned up the turkey and everything, and packed all my bags and headed to Pittsburgh Airport. So that's kind of how my season went there. Just came back for one more day, which was yesterday. Hunted, how long was it? I hunted all day, dark to dark, in one of my favorite spots, Creek Bottom. That last year I killed my buck right at noon, and it's great. There's a doe between 2 different doe bedding areas, actually. Creek crossings, beaver ponds, the whole works that makes it the ultimate travel corridor once you get later in the rut like that. And right at noon, I spotted one of the big 8 points that I had been after. He cruised out about 100 yards, and he looks over my way, and I realize he's missing a whole beam. He broke it off right at the base on the opposite side, and very mature, at least a 4-year-old deer, probably from if you're going to go with an inch side of things, just for people to kind of get an idea of this buck. He's probably 135 to 140 inch 8 point, which is really big for, Pennsylvania 8 point. And so don't make me, I don't want to give off a false accusation here thinking that I passed on this deer because he only had one side, because believe me, I was going to shoot him. He met the criteria, everything I wanted, and I'm pretty sure I could have found that broken off tine in shed season, or when I say tine, the whole beam. But it was, he didn't read the script. He had something else on his mind, and obviously got his ass kicked already once and didn't feel like getting into another battle, so he just kind of moved along. But that was the only deer I saw, and it's kind of bittersweet to end the Pennsylvania archery season like that. Excuse me. I think this is the first time since 2012 that I haven't filled a buck tag by now, so it's been an interesting year, that's for sure. But just keep kind of grinding it out. Time to pick up the rifle in PA. Maybe head to Ohio sometime in the middle here, just on weekends, since I've burned all my vacation from work. So we'll see what happens. And again, I hope everyone's had a good luck to this point. And if you stayed with me this long, then you're actually going to get into the good part of the conversation here when I get Jim on the line. So I hope you enjoy this podcast with Jim, and everything that he says is from experience and tried and tested. Great information. So hope everyone enjoys it. Thanks. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast. And I'm sitting here in very cold Alberta. What town are we in here, Jim?
We're by Stony Plain, Alberta.
Stony Plain, Alberta. So way north of the border, I'd say this week here. So I'm sitting here with Mr. Jim Holt Jr. with Classic Outfitters. Jim, how are we doing this evening?
We're doing good. Good. Thanks for the invitation. Boy, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah.
Always happy to talk a little bit of bow hunting.
Yes, it's a pleasure. I'm had a great week so far here. So up here hunting with you on a trip here with Sitka Gear. Came up to do some product testing, and in the nice cold frigid temperatures that we have here in Alberta. It hasn't been as bad as that you had warned me about, but it's still been pretty chilly, I'd say.
Yeah, it's been kind of a classic week up here in terms of second week of November, and we've got some snow on the ground. We've had some snow in the air, nothing heavy, but we had some frigid temperatures this morning. I think we were approaching 0 this morning, and the gear has served us well in terms of keeping us comfortable. So it's been nice. We haven't been suffering up here, which has been a good deal. Yeah,
it was actually really, really nice, and getting to kind of see some of the different gear that you guys use up here was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty specialized, that's for sure. The sport is specialized, the gear is specialized. And it certainly takes a certain type of person that would enjoy this sort of thing.
Yeah, that's for sure. We just finished up a pretty amazing dinner, I would say. Chef Eddie does an amazing job, and you and I were kind of joking around before this, but we haven't taken it lightly on the sweets, I'd say.
No, exactly. Yeah, Chef Eddie's been looking after us here for years, and he's one of the guys that we have a lot of respect for. And that's the one thing I think that we're proudest of, is a lot of the quality people that we've surrounded ourselves with and up here, and Chef Eddie's one of them, and there's a bunch, and the people that we've attracted over the years too. It's really a special place because of the people that we have come visit us.
Yeah, it seems that way. It's very family oriented, business that you're kind of running around here. So before we get into that anymore here, Jim, if you'd like to kind of introduce yourself here and talk about your outfitting business and kind of how long you've been doing that in the bow zone.
Yeah, Bo, it's been a while, probably longer than I care to admit. I think this is year 35 or 36 for us, but specific to answer your question, I'm in the bow hunting in the Edmonton bow zone, and have been here, live in this area my entire life, and been up here 50 plus years, and outfitting for 35, 36 of them, and we're just real dear to the whitetail tree stand bow hunting up here, especially in the month of November, and a little bit in September and October as well. But that's the gist of it. It's just a very difficult game to play, and it keeps us entertained. It keeps us honest. It's a lot of fun to work at it.
Yeah, and Jim, the funny thing is when I was planning on coming up here, I was looking on your website and kind of reading some old magazine articles that were written either about you or that you had written in the past, and there was one specific that came to mind for I think it was back in 1999. You wrote one for I'm trying to think, North American Whitetail or what? I can't
It was
remember.
99. I'm guessing you're heading towards a big buck we took back then, and it was 99, and it was for Big Buck magazine based out of Saskatchewan, I believe, actually.
Okay, or maybe it was 2000. There was one that you had done for United States magazine. I can't remember what the name of it is off the top of my head. One of the big ones. But anyways, I recognized the cover on it, the cover photo, and I looked through on your website. You could see the magazine, and at that time I was a younger kid, I guess, at the time, and I had that magazine, I remember, at my grandfather's house, and had drawn a picture. I used to be really into drawing and wood carving and stuff, and I'd drawn pictures out of that specific magazine
Really?
that was on there from your guys's hunt. So that was, I didn't even get to tell you that yet.
Yeah.
But it was pretty funny. I have a picture of the drawing. I believe it's over at our camp on the wall when I was like 9 years old or so, that
Wow.
had written on there. So
Well, that's unique. We occasionally hear something not of that nature, but we've had a lot of people up over the years, and we've had pro athletes, and I remember I had a pro athlete tell me a few years ago that when he was playing pro, he said when he retired, he had a magazine. He said, "I'm going to this place," because he was reading about it. So
that's crazy.
it's funny. Yeah, it attracts all types. But that's very interesting with the drawing. I haven't heard such a thing.
Yeah, and it had been something like whenever I thought of as a kid growing up, and I don't remember if it was, that specific magazine article or just any other ones, but Alberta was always a place that I wanted to go for big bucks.
Yeah.
Just all I remember thinking of. So it's pretty surreal to me to be actually here right now. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, that's just a pretty awesome, experience to be able to do that.
Yeah, the thing that's interesting when you talk about Alberta is when I started outfitting so many years ago, it was always very popular in hunting big deer, as is Saskatchewan for big Canadian whitetails. But the thing back then when we started, the bow hunting game really wasn't very refined. It was very more primitive in terms of the outfitting and the hunting. And guys were doing it, but the equipment wasn't precise. The tree stands were challenging. The bows were challenging, and the knowledge really lacked as well. So that was a real inspiration to us to work at it and work at the craft and try to master the craft as best we could, which has been a lifetime journey.
Yeah. Yeah. So with that being said, you're talking about kind of the difference, changing into the archery world and bow hunting these, big North Country whitetails. What exactly is the bow zone that we're in right now?
Yeah, the Edmonton bow zone is basically a brief approximation, or a rough approximation would be about a 30-mile radius of the city of Edmonton that encompasses 1,600 and some square miles. And so that is the Edmonton bow zone. The season generally runs from September 1st to November 30th. But the prime Edmonton bow zone is generally the western portion because it's never open to firearms. The south portion is, the east portion is, and the north portion, there isn't much for timber up there. So it's much more restrictive. So that's the gist of it as far as what the bow zone is. And it's been 30 some years that it's been archery only, so it's a pretty special place to be with lack of harvest and the northern genetics and the fact that the bucks just grow big because of the nutrients in the soil.
Yeah I experienced that on night one.
Yeah Yeah,
tree stand, and you're one of those people that you're not gonna, I guess, blow smoke up anybody's ass as far as saying, that you're gonna come here and automatically be putting giant whitetails. You're like, one, you're gonna work for it.
Yeah.
Two, the deer population isn't extremely high, so it's gonna be a waiting game.
Yeah.
But you do have the potential to have an opportunity at some absolutely giant whitetails, and it just so happened that the first 15 minutes in the stand that I had a truly world-class whitetail come by. I'm like, Jim didn't say it was this easy, but
yeah, that's right. There's nothing to it. No, but that's just the thing. I mean, it can happen anytime, and you've done a bunch of bow hunting, so you know how precious it can be, and I enjoy the loaded question. When I asked, have you seen a few good whitetails like that in your life? And when you said you figured it was like a 180, 190 class whitetail, or 170, 180, I can't quite recall.
Yeah, I had said 170 to 180 being conservative, and then once I described to you what the buck was, you said, well, that buck was probably over 190 last year.
Right. But when, I just enjoy hearing it back because this area is special to us. And when somebody says to you what it is and it's the biggest buck they've ever seen, it's rewarding for us because we put a lot into it. And it never gets old hearing somebody say something that's very special to them. They have the opportunity to see a deer like that. Yeah,
it's truly like you and I had talked about it when I came back. And I felt weird saying it when you're like, is that, it's the biggest buck I ever seen in my life. You hear that kind of stuff, but it was truly the biggest deer I'd ever seen. And just being able to watch that animal, just the big body and everything, and the way he kind of just owned, the woods there as he was coming through. So that was a really special experience. But anyways, kind of what you were getting into there with, there's relatively low deer density. And what is the kind of reason for that?
It's just natural in the north, quite frankly. I mean, in some of the lower states and some of the Midwest, you guys have a lot of deer and a lot of population problem, really, with a lot of the guys are harvesting. A lot of the hunters are trying to harvest as many does as possible. We have a natural, I would say, 3 to 4 doe to buck ratio, and we don't have a lot of deer. We can have a fair population, but we just don't have a lot of deer.
Yeah.
And it's the magnitude of the deer that we have, though, that makes it special for sure.
Yeah. But the one thing that's so interesting about these deer, I mean, killing a big deer, an old deer, mature deer anywhere is not an easy task. But it seems like here it's almost, I don't know, it seems even more difficult from I don't really know how to put it into words. Can you kind of explain that a little bit?
Yeah, that's actually a good question or a good comment, Bo, because to put it into words, I mean, there's several factors that make it difficult up here. Firstly, of course, as we've already touched on, you're hunting big deer, but big deer, mature deer, which are experienced deer, which I always refer to. But the elements also don't help. The numbers are lower, but in addition, which we've already said, but the elements itself, which is a lot of reason why we're up here field testing gear.
Yeah.
It's very specialized, and it has to be very disciplined with gear, and it has to be very, very disciplined in terms of approach and strategy, because the northern latitude, we don't have the foliage, and things are very, very quiet up here. It's cold. The sound is even worse because of that. So there's a lot to it that's working against you. Mm-hmm. Firstly, you've got the experienced deer that are so well educated. You've got conditions that are difficult and very, very quiet. You've got temperatures that are cold that challenge you in every regard, from clothing to archery equipment to tree stands. And getting in and out is a huge issue as well. I mean, this week in particular, as you know well, you touch your feet on the snow that's melted and frozen again. It's a noisy place to be this week.
Yeah. It's very difficult from that aspect. I mean, and it's so silent.
Yeah.
Like you're putting there is to explain it to you. If you're sitting in the tree stand, you can hear a crow flying from 100 yards away. Not them making noises, just their wings.
Yeah.
You can hear the sound of their wings going through the air, and I don't know. You're probably used to it, but
yeah, I'm used to it. But you never take it for granted. I always say that you can on a quiet morning, you can literally hear a car on a gravel road 5 miles away, and that's not an exaggeration. Mm-hmm. You can hear it, and you've heard it because you've been up a few days. So it's amazing how far that sound travels.
Yeah,
and the air is colder and more dense, and the sound just travels.
Yeah,
and just a total lack of cover noise because the leaves aren't shaking, and when the winds are calm, it's just super quiet.
Yeah, I went from, a week of bow hunting in the Appalachian Mountains in Pennsylvania where the leaves actually are behind as far as falling off. So there's still a lot of leaves on the trees, and it was really windy.
Yeah.
And it was so loud that you couldn't hear anything. You couldn't hear a deer coming in, anything. Here, you hear deer coming from quite a ways, at least with the conditions that we have now. But even more important is they can hear you in every mistake that you possibly make.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember we were looking at your rest a couple days ago, and your rest would work fine in Alberta in early season, September to early October. But once it cools off, it needs to be moleskinned up and taped up and just silenced. It has to be silenced, otherwise you've got a big problem coming.
Yeah, and that's what I ended up doing is replacing the felt that was on there and putting a thick piece of moleskin, and it made it a lot quieter, as far as when we were testing it. And every time I get in the stand when it's cold out, I always draw my bow back to make sure that there's any, issues there, and it was definitely pretty quiet, which there's a lot of other steps, I guess you could say, for making yourself quiet or the being more effective, I guess, with hunting through sound. And that was something that from the day we walked in, actually well before we walked in here with your paperwork that you had sent out. Yeah. But from the day we walked in here was you were stressing the importance of silence. And it can kind of go into that a little bit.
Oh, it's just a huge game up here. I mean, if you're not silent, you're not in it. Plain and simple. And I've watched it year in and year out, and I've also watched guys that convince themselves that they're pretty quiet and they're gonna do all right. But I can't stress enough that if you're not silent, and I mean silent, that's the key word here, silent.
Yeah.
If you're pretty quiet, you're not in the game. You have to have your gear silenced. Your bow has to be silent. Your rest has to be silent. Your clothing has to be silent. If you have zippers, they need to be taped. Mm-hmm. Just everything has to be quiet. Otherwise, you're just not headed for the kind of opportunity at the world-class whitetails that the guys are after. We've got them, but it doesn't mean you can get anywhere near them if you're not set up properly. And, of course, you don't have the disciplines to do what you need to do to get near them.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that you're keeping a couple companies in business with buying their hockey tape.
Yeah, that's kind of a standing joke we have, and it's out of necessity. Before every season, we buy rolls and rolls and rolls of hockey tape, and as we sit here, I'm staring at a bow that's all hockey taped, and it's just a standing joke with us that we've even had hunters come here and go to other places to hunt. And another hunter in camp will say, "I see that you've hunted the bow zone, and I think I know who you hunted with because of the hockey." They'll have their gear covered in hockey tape. So, but hockey tape is responsible for the success on a lot of mature whitetails. It really aids with making things quiet.
Yeah, and not to mention too, from when you just do your bow grip, it helps with not making it so cold when you grab a hold of it, because you grab a hold of that aluminum riser, you can't hold on to it for very long.
No, you have to have your gear figured out, the hockey tape for the insulative qualities, like you said, but you're just not going to last if you don't have your systems figured about you. And that's the one thing I talk about hunting up here is a lot of guys get excited and they get optimistic about hunting up here. And I don't mean a pessimist. I don't mean to be a pessimist, but I'm always a realist. I go, there's nothing that's easy about it. Like the fact that you jumped in your first night and had a world-class deer walk by you, that, of course, is not the norm.
Yeah.
And, of course, he didn't present a shot to you based on not coming through ground that was clear enough for you. But the point being is you have to put your time in up here. And, I could tell the second you showed up, I looked at you and your gear and so on, I could tell that you were good at the game. You can recognize that in guys, and I wasn't surprised that it happened to you. And then you've been getting close to some deer on a few other occasions as well. Yeah. But the thing that is tough to watch or sad to watch are the guys that come up with a mindset from somewhere else because it works in that other place, but it doesn't work at all in Alberta because of the northern latitude or the nature of the deer, if the deer in fact are more advanced in experience up here.
Yeah. And I don't want to put words in your mouth here, Jim, but I think you would agree. The kind of the way I came into this was thinking, throw everything that I know out the window as far as, okay, these are the tactics that work in Pennsylvania or Ohio or whatever, and listen to the way you have your program set and follow it, because obviously it's been successful over the last 35 years. And you kind of have to, the male figure is ego driven a lot of times. Yeah. Again, put that lightly.
Well, that's probably been our biggest obstacle is, if you want to put it that way, the male ego, where a guy thinks he knows what he's doing because he's done something elsewhere. And my disciplines are the same. When I travel somewhere, I have the opportunity to travel to places to bow hunt or fly fish. And man, I'll tell you, the first thing I do when I get there, including some outfitters that I've mentored that are younger than me on getting their quality places set up, the first thing I do when I show up there is tell me what you want me to do and how you want me to do it, when you want me to do it and how you want me to do it, following their lead.
Yeah.
Am I on track here with I always say there's a knack to being successful anywhere at anything. So surrender yourself to those guys that are good at it, that are there. We like to think we're pretty good at it up here. But if a guy doesn't surrender himself, we can't help him. Mm-hmm. If he doesn't surrender himself to our system that we've developed with all the hunters, thousands upon thousands of hours up here in preparations and so on, we can't help him, and that's the thing.
Okay.
A lot of guys are their own worst obstacle. Of course, it would be ignorant to say that you have all the answers, because we don't. And that's why I'm in this game, because after all the years of doing it, we're still learning. But if there's one thing I've learned is when in Rome, do as the Romans do and figure out why later.
Yeah.
So we've got a track record of some success, and there's good years, bad years. That's part of every game and every business and whatever. But that's how we go about doing it, is staying humble and trying to be good enough every day by our own habits as well.
Yeah. That's something that it was pretty clear to me when I came here. You drove home the point of you can't let yourself slip. It's pretty easy once you think you're starting to get good, say even at your own program or anything. It's easy to kind of get complacent with it and fall off. Every day you got to remind yourself this is day 0 again. We're starting over. Yeah. And focus on it and keep getting better. Yeah. Every time we come back from a hunt here, we're 3 days in now, but say you come back from the morning hunt, you come down and say, hey, what are the 3 or 4 things that happened that you did not like? Whether it was a gear thing or something that happened you weren't smooth with, fix it and go back out, and that's just continually improving the process to try to get, again, closer to these world-class whitetails.
Yeah, no, that's right. You just got to, you just have to keep chasing excellence, really, is what you got to do. And I've been doing this for a long time, but I'll tell you, every time I come in, I work on the 2 or 3 little things that I need to tweak or maintain or whatever to make sure I'm up to speed with where I need to be. But like I said, there's nothing easy about it. You have to be perpetually demanding on yourself, your gear, your disciplines. There's just, you have good years where you get it done and you kind of start to think a little bit of yourself, and then you get sloppy, and then you get punished for it. You always do. Yeah. So if you don't stay humble and working, and I always say it doesn't matter how much you pay for a hunt if you're not going to go there and work it. All my hunts are designed to be tough. Mm-hmm. That's the idea. If they weren't tough, I wouldn't be doing them. I'm not interested in them personally, and I'm not interested in offering hunts that aren't difficult hunts. Yeah. I don't mean difficult to the point that they're not worth doing or worthy of doing, but I mean, if it was an easy game, I wouldn't be in it.
Yeah, then it really wouldn't be hunting, in my opinion. I do it because, one, it's a challenge, and no matter how you come out of a hunt, you learn so much from it and help you in everyday life, and also in becoming a better hunter all around. So we've kind of touched base on some of the parts of your program, is what you call it, basically. With the silencing of your gear and silencing yourself and everything. But what are some of the other what are your kind of tactics to being successful with it, as far as kind of dig into your tree stand setup, and also when you're kind of choosing how the hunters are going to sit, your kind of strategy, which is a little bit different than some other outfitters from a aggressive versus passive kind of standpoint, I guess?
Yeah, I mean that's a big question to answer, and I'll do my best, Bo, in this one, because it's
that's kind of a loaded question.
It's a tough question to answer in detail, and I'll probably end up with a run-on sentence here. But first and foremost is a preparation, and in one single word, it's silence. Of course, you're talking about the tree stands and the bows and the clothing. Everything has to be silenced. Hence, we talked about the hockey tape. Then, when you roll from that, and of course we tape tree stands with hockey tape. Everything's covered with hockey tape. The tree stands included. It's not possible to touch anything metal because of the hockey tape. Our bows are set up obviously to draw quietly, but they're also set up that if things go wrong and your arrow gets knocked off a rest or within a rest that retains your arrow, that it still can't hit anything because everything else is taped up. And then as far as your gear, your zippers are taped. If you put your gear on and jump up and down, nothing should be rattling. That sort of detail. So we figured out how to silence that. We had a pair of binoculars that had the typical plastic clips and metal rings. We go to a wire cutter. The plastic clips are gone. The metal rings get removed. We use either a silent string or what we call hockey tape string, where we spin a roll of hockey tape and create a string.
Yeah.
We've called that hockey tape string for years. So it's dead silent. You can't make that or have that make any noise. So that's the prep on the gear, more or less. But if there's any single thing that can make noise in your gear, I mean, I've walked up to hunters with my knife saying, I'm going to cut this off your gear and cut that off your gear, if that's all right, and I'm cutting pieces off, like a chest strap that's unnecessary with a plastic buckle on a backpack. The backpack may be quiet, but if there's a chest strap going across there with a plastic buckle, we cut it off because it's not necessary in whitetail hunting, or it's not our whitetail hunting.
Yep.
And then when you go to the process itself, or the approach.
And real quick, Jim, actually that was one thing that with my binoculars, I had some of those metal clips and everything, and I would have never imagined that would be an issue. And then you grabbed it and you shook it. You said, "Listen to that. Did you hear that?"
Yeah.
There's your opportunity gone.
That's it.
So we went in, cut it all off. Use your hockey tape string, which I need to get a picture of that, because that's funny. I'm going to run my binoculars like that from now on. I mean, it's
not pretty, but it's deadly.
Yeah, that's 100% true.
Yeah, but no, that's just it. I mean, I always say our hunts are kind of like a piece of chain. If you have a piece of chain that's 24 lengths long and one of them is cut weak, that's probably what's going to get you. It doesn't matter how strong the rest of the chain is. You take one length and cut it 3/4 the way through or 90% the way through. That's how strong your system is. I mean, if that doesn't get exposed, you might get away with it once, but it's going to get you in the long run, no question.
Yeah. No, that's very true.
Yeah, but getting back, I mean, we talked about the gear, we talked about the stands, we talked about the bows. I mean, the clothing. I mean, everything's based on silence, so you can physically prep your stuff, and it's amazing. Even when I demand guys to physically prep themselves, I realize how extreme we are, or how anal I am, because I see that a lot of guys think they prep themselves and they're still only 75% the way there when they show up. So we keep working on other things. But as far as stepping from the gear to our approach in the field, it's a different deal there. I mean, you have to figure out what you can get away with and what you can't, especially with the weather that we have right now with this noisy snow. There's a lot of tree stand sites we can't get to right now. I mean, it's too noisy. We can't get there without telling every deer in the woods that we're trying to get in there. So you use some common sense and some disciplines there to stay away from those sites until we do get the snow or the weather, the warmer weather, or whatever it is that lets us get there, and hunt accordingly. And hunting accordingly to me is hunting objectively as to where you should be, as to where you can get in and out with big deer not getting onto you. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's the key. Is a lot of guys hunt with the thought in mind, is they want to do this and they want to do that. I always say that's a breaking a cardinal rule. You don't do what you want to do. You do what you should do. Yeah. If your objective is to get on big deer.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah. And if you're coming here, that's what your objective.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
That's the idea. So a lot of guys come up and when I was a younger guide, they didn't want to listen to the young guy too much. And unfortunately, I'm an older guide now. And fortunately, I've earned the right to have some of the guys want to listen to me a little more. And I can kind of get away with laying down the law a little bit as to how we do things. And it's like anything. Anybody that's in any business has got their skill set and experience. That's one of the things that I say is we're proud of who we are. We're proud of what we've done. But we also know that, you know, we're surrounded by a lot of talented people that are in the room that might not know our game, and that's a lot of the reason they can hunt with us, or they want to hunt with us. Mm-hmm. But I also know that, put the egos aside, I know all of these guys can embarrass me in a moment in their business or skill set and their talents. So we're proud of who we are, but humble all at the same time. So, you know, we're trying to help these guys, and if they'll let us help them, and try to play the game to the best of our abilities.
Yeah, no, and that's a big thing. I think you've done well this week as far as it doesn't matter who's here, what their skill level is, what they've done outside of it. You're treating every single person exactly the same, and going through, because this process that you have to kill these whitetails, like you said, it may or may not be perfect, and there's probably some little things that could be, you know, that are flawed or whatever, that you continually change and, you know, I guess adjust as the years go on. But everyone, the more that they go through this system and follow it, the better chance of success they have, instead of going on their own thing. And then, like, when I was joking around with you about your bowstring, I was like, you could probably get that changed out, Jim. Looks a little bit old on there. And you thought about it, and then you asked me some questions about it later, and because you're like, that's something that that I know you know a little bit about, and you respected, and you had that for each guy here. You know, everyone's got their strong points.
Oh, absolutely.
And you kind of show respect to that.
Absolutely. You know, and I've been in the bow hunting business and a bow hunter my entire life. You know, mm-hmm. And that's the one thing that to me is very important to do, and I appreciate you saying that, because you talked of the fact that you had spent a bunch of time messing with archery equipment. I've shot bows my whole life, and I've shot beside some of the world's best shooters. I'm not one of them. Mm-hmm. That's not my skill set. I'm fine in terms of shooting archery equipment. I can shoot. I'm hunting accurate. I'm a close range bow hunter. I'm 40 yards and in on whitetails. And I want to be 20 yards in on whitetails, or 10 yards in. It's more fun for me. Yeah. But when I'm talking to somebody who's specialized in archery, they're a specialist at shooting bows more accurately than I am. What I'm proud of is getting close to world-class whitetails, where I don't have to be a world-class archer, for one thing. I'm interested in being a good archer, so everything is ethical, of course, and surgical and precise if you're actually shooting, because that's how the sport should go, in my opinion. But yeah, I enjoy being around guys that are better than me in a lot of different disciplines. But my skill set is the intricacies and the tricks to get close to some of the biggest whitetails, if not the biggest whitetails in the world. Yeah,
and one thing that you had mentioned, and it's obviously I guess I should say it's obvious by looking back at some of the deer that you've killed or anything, is you're a hunter first and foremost. Like you said, you get off on finding these giant whitetails, getting close, getting in range, and then when you're there, that when you have that opportunity, they're dead before that arrow goes. You have that instinct, I guess. This is me looking from an outside point of view, but it's kind of a difference between a hunter and an archer, I guess.
Well, I think maybe the best way to describe it is, I mean, I would never be arrogant in saying, yeah, when I know they're close, I know it's a done deal, because bow hunting is a tough game. But I think we've trained to have an inner peace or calm when you get close to those animals, which takes years and years and years to develop. And even with that said, I'm hoping the next time it happens, I can in fact maintain my disciplines to be that guy, because we have been fortunate to take a lot of those good animals, but you just don't know. If these deer don't rattle you once in a while, you really shouldn't be in this game. And I can't remember the last time it happened, but I felt it a month ago on a good mule deer, and I was kind of surprised that those instincts kicked in, and a good mule deer rattled me on a hunt, and I went, wow, I didn't see that coming. So yeah, so I will never talk like I've got it figured out, because I'm comfortable with who I am on this stuff, but you can be tuned in pretty soon by these animals.
Yeah, no, but that's funny. But again, you still have to be confident with it too. And that's what I was getting at. I didn't mean to say you're arrogant, like, all right, this is a done deal. But at the same time, you were confident, and the years of experience and also the discipline that you've, had to get to that point, I guess, is a little bit better way of putting it.
Yeah. But it's a humbling game for sure. That's the thing that I enjoy about this sport so much, is if your mindset is too weak, you're in trouble. If your mindset is too arrogant, you're in trouble. Mm-hmm. If you can walk that middle ground and try to be good enough for it, well practiced and good enough, and keep your head in the right place, you might be just where you are. But I've had hunters, I mean, clear of you and I mean, I've got a hunter coming next week from your part of the country, actually, from Pennsylvania, and he was up here 27 years ago. And he's coming back because he could never get it done here. He came here, he learned a lot of his skills here. Mm-hmm. And he just constantly got beat up by these deer. They just shook him up too much. And he stepped away from here, went to a lot of places, and successfully bow hunted a lot of game. And he's on his way back because he can't stand the fact that he couldn't win up here. So he's here in a few days. So it's going to be interesting. And he's trained mentally, physically, and he's in his 50s now, and he's ready to get after it. And we've had that before with other guys too.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that's not the case with me. If being in my 20s now,
Yeah.
Getting old, which it's pretty tough to not get rattled on some of these, whitetails.
You look like you got your head in the right place. If there's one thing I've learned in this game, or I'd like to think I've learned, is I can look at the guys and see the skill sets. And you're with a strong crew this week, and
I put on a good mask.
Yeah, you put on a good mask on the first day. So no, you were recognizable, in my opinion, as a guy that has done a lot of time in the field, and you look like you can get it done. But it's easy to also say, what's going to happen? Because that can happen to you, it can happen to me. So who knows? But just try to be good enough, and hopefully we can get it done,
One thing you said to me on the way out the door, going out for an afternoon hunt, made me really think the whole way out there. You're like, when that opportunity presents itself again, are you going to be able to capitalize? You're going to be able to keep yourself in it, and that's something you got to constantly think about, because you can't just surprise yourself with the way you would put it was, everybody wants a chance at one of these whitetails. Well, what do you do when you have that chance?
Well, that's just it. It's if you don't plan for it, all you do is react. And a reaction is not the way to be successful. What you're trying to do is to create a trained response. And that's pre-planned. And that's the thing that this sport teaches you. Any high-level sport, you run into a situation that's stressful, and you immediately switch to a trained response to handle that situation. You don't run into something that's high stress and react to it. That is not the way to do it, and experience has taught us in this. Like, my mental disciplines that I like to think are fairly strong and committed, I'm already thinking of my moves when an animal gets close to me, and not moving, of course, to get them close, and that's a discipline. We refer to the art of nothing, to do everything possible
to do nothing.
To do nothing, to not exist and such. So but if you only need to do 6 things, do 6 things. Don't do 12 things to get 6 things done, or 12 moves to get 6 things done. So there's a lot of little things, but the mental disciplines, jumping back and back on track, is you really have to discipline yourself to respond to something rather than see how you react.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to big whitetails, you're not going to react well.
Yeah, that's the other thing that was sticking in my head. Like I said, I've been really trying to came into this hunt wanting to take home as much as I can, whether that's obviously I hope that's also a set of antlers and everything, but more or less learning to become a better bow hunter. And that was one of the things that one of my big take homes is responding rather than reacting.
Right.
And so it's in my brain right now. When I was watching deer out in the fields this afternoon, instead of instantly you see it and all of a sudden you want to grab your binos and you want to do this, just relax for a second, kind of see what their body motion's doing, see what you can do at that point, and respond rather than reacting.
Yeah, and the response thing, I always refer to staying on your center. Mm-hmm. Like don't let something get you off your center. And there's a lot of things in this world that push you off your center that make you excitable or nervous or intimidated or whatever it is. And that's a discipline in hunting that is a discipline in life, in my opinion, that when you run into a stressful situation of whatever kind, you have to try to keep your center about you. And that's a big, big thing in hunting big whitetails.
Yeah, and I think, and then like you said, it carries over to everyday life too, as far as, someone says something that may piss you off. Instead of reacting right away, respond rather than, kind of think it through and not just jump at a thing and say something that may not be appropriate or make you know better than that guy.
And that's your planned response. Yeah. Which is exactly what we're referring to, which has nothing to do with deer hunting in terms of the material that we're speaking of, but the exercise itself. And it parallels exactly what happens in deer hunting. When you see a small doe or a little buck or whatever, it's interesting, it's fun, it's whatever. But when you see something of the magnitude that you saw, it is a different world. So you have to act a certain way. Mm-hmm. You're at a different level that affects you, different emotionally and physically and spiritually for that matter. Yeah, no, that's completely true. But I think really the thing that I would try to speak to guys mostly on is the mindset, and I think that's a great material that we're covering right now. I think that's very, very important. But just the game. I refer to higher awareness when it comes to bigger whitetails as well. If we're talking, hardcore on the big whitetail game, I would always refer to the term higher awareness as well, because a lot of hunters get into the game of hunting deer. Well, they are hunting deer, but they'd love to get a big whitetail buck one day, or whatever it is that they're after, big mule deer buck, whatever it is. But these animals are experienced and they live with a higher awareness. When guys are hunting and they're getting close to does and small bucks and mid-range bucks, and they're in the deer, they're thinking, I got this going on, I'm on it, I've got it. Well, you may or you may not. There's a good chance that you don't, but the inexperienced animals are tolerating you. Mm-hmm. And for instance, today, I saw a good example of it today, because we're doing some film work up here this week, and we were in this one spot, and we've got a couple of vehicles, and we're taking some photos and some films and so on, and there's fresh truck tracks from yesterday, and then I see a bunch of tracks on our truck tracks, and sure enough, it's all the does and the small bucks and fawns walking all over our truck tracks, because they're curious as to what it all is. Mm-hmm. Well, I looked very specifically, because there's not one big buck track anywhere near any of those tracks, because they won't go anywhere near that sort of disturbance. So it's the nature of the beast. It's a totally different animal when you're hunting these animals that are experienced. They know how to survive, and they'll go nowhere near something like that just to check it out. Well, it's funny you say that. I had a couple years ago, I had a small lease in Ohio. It was like 50 acres that a guy had owned the land and got to know him and paid money to hunt this property, I guess. And all of a sudden I get there in hunting season, and he has a shooting range right through the middle of the one field.
mean, 50 acres isn't very big
No.
to have a shooting range in there. And, I said something to him. I was like, hey, this isn't really, great for the deer and everything. He's like, well, I saw this 8-pointer down in the back there after we get done shooting. And I said, yeah, but it's a different, story for mature whitetails versus, does and smaller bucks. It's what I was getting at. It's just a whole different animal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Almost. And that can be, it's one thing for the size of the whitetails here in Alberta, but that can be anywhere in the country when you're hunting experienced or, mature whitetails.
Yeah.
And the same, disciplines can be applied in their own sense,
Yeah. Yeah. And the one I say commonly when we're referring to experience too, I mean, a lot of people think deer hunting is so unique in its way. And I always say that a lot of things in this world are parallel or very similar, which is when you're referring to experience, if you're talking about somebody that's young versus somebody who's older and you're trying to fool them with something, it just doesn't take much common sense to realize that somebody in their teens is easy to fool versus somebody in their 60s or 70s. And it's very similar in the hunting world.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And like you said, is you can, when you're dealing with something with experience, they've seen the things that have almost got them killed,
exactly.
in the past, and they don't make those mistakes more than once, usually.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think another one of my big takeaways from this, and even though I'm only halfway through the week here and I haven't got a chance to kill my whitetail yet, which by the time this airs, I will.
I appreciate optimism.
How about it, Jim? Every day I leave the door, you're like, Bo, what are you thinking today? I said 100% success.
That's it.
And the people on the podcast have heard me say that on my 14-day elk trip, but this one's going to turn out different,
Yeah. That's it.
But
That's it.
yeah. So, but anyways, one of my big takeaways is really paying attention. So when I'm hunting, whether I'm hunting mountain whitetails in Pennsylvania or whatever I'm doing, is paying attention to them details and staying disciplined with it, no matter how long the season's going on, not taking shortcuts. And the other thing that I learned was just because you have the time to hunt, don't just go hunt if you're not prepared for it. Sometimes maybe you need to get with it. I catch myself sometimes with just trying to get in as many days as possible to hunt, when if you could have I guess less amount of days to hunt, but you do them more perfectly, I guess, and lined up. I don't know. That's something I'm picking up on.
Yeah. The disciplined hunting methods is key. And, I remember guiding a guy 20 years ago, and he said he wanted to hunt all day. And the way we were hunting and the deer were moving at that time, I said, how would you feel about if I hunt you half the time and show you twice the deer? Because I know how we're going to do it, and we're going to catch them at certain times versus you being in a spot that's a sleeper half the time. And don't get me wrong, midday or all day hunting can be very, very effective. But there's other times that you can really focus on being more technically sound and getting on animals. Mm-hmm. It's. I remember the habit that I've had for years as well is a morning hunt, lunch and a quick nap, and then an afternoon hunt. And I'll do some all day hunts sometimes too. But I've had guys say to me, "You got to be tough. You got to be tough. You got to hunt hard." I go, "You hunt hard, I'll hunt smart." Because 3 or 4 days or 5 or 6 or 9 days into it, I'm still fresh and I've got my wits about me to hunt with what I think is somewhat of a level of intellect.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is think it through and be disciplined as well by doing, touched on it earlier, but do what you should do versus what you want to do. The brand new stand that you set that you're dying to get into, well, it was set up on a northwest wind. Well, it's Saturday morning. Don't go in there if it's not a northwest wind. Mm-hmm. Don't go in there on a compromising wind. And we do it in other hunts as well. If we know, like an early season whitetail hunt, we find that the evening hunts generally hunt better than the mornings. The deer are kind of lazier in the mornings and so on. And I'll tell you what we're going to do on those morning hunts is we're going to stay away from our quality evening hunts. Mm-hmm. We'll do anything but mess with our quality evening hunts.
Yeah.
I'm not saying the morning hunts are a waste of time, but that's a discipline. that's a learned discipline to focus on when it's going to happen, or when it should happen. And if you have 6 evenings to hunt, you try to pick 6 perfect evenings with sites that you should work. Not that you want to work, but you should work. I mean, you might want to, but I'm explaining the logic of discipline, of discipline hunting. And but those morning hunts, you're trying to get in the game to some extent, but you keep it clear of those quality evenings.
Yeah, no, I'm completely understanding what you're saying.
Yeah.
And and again, you can apply that to many different things as far as just keeping the discipline. And when you set something, and I struggled this year with it too. I actually there's my favorite stand I haven't sat in yet because I haven't had the right conditions. Which once I get back on Monday, the last day of the season, I'm hoping everything is right for it because it's around certain dates. I know it's good. I've tried hunting it all different times of the season. I know when this spot's good and what I need for it. And a lot of times the first sit's always the best set, it seems like. And that's why here, I doubt that we'll sit in the same stand twice,
No, we've been at it a while. We have a bunch of stand sites, and we run a different system too, which we didn't really cover, as we do the portable system. So in our case, we take a stand and naturally a bow and a pack to every tree with us, and we bounce around. So we're basically hunting tree stand sites that consist of 12 or 14 tree steps per tree. You go and you use a lineman to get up, and you set up fully and completely, do your hunt, bring your gear out, and we've been doing that for years. And to us, it's a very, very effective system because we have so many tree stand options. So we can bounce around a lot depending on what the wind directions are, the conditions, or we're hunting winds or thermals or whatever. We have all kinds of options, but it just is a system that's so versatile. And especially at this time of year, we're talking about the snow. That it's snowed, it's melted, it's frozen, it's crunchy. That if we were leaving stands in the field, that's how the stands would be as well. And we wouldn't be getting big deer off of those stands.
Yep.
So that's another thing we're doing as well.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And I think with that point there, I kind of want to bring up. Are we allowed to talk and that these guys are filming you?
Yeah.
Is that public
probably
knowledge?
Probably. I mean, we're working on some product development and stuff. So I mean, we can probably talk a little bit about the fact that we're filming, and we're filming some of the things that we talk about here. So.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to get at is, I don't know when it's going to be released. Do you know? Is it sometime around the launch?
I'm actually not sure what's happening as far as the product. I mean, we're constantly working on innovation and such, and
what about the film though? Is that going to be around the same time?
I'm not quite sure when they're going to release the footage that we're filming here, but all I know is the guys have been doing a good job and covering product and tactics and such, and it's going to be interesting.
Shannon and his crew are some very, very talented individuals.
I was just going to say it's a very quality production that we're working on, and I feel blessed with the fact that I have the opportunity to be involved and to give back with some knowledge. I mean, I've been blessed to be in this game a long, long time, and the guys that have supported my business over the years that are working in the factories and working in all the different businesses that are saving their bucks to come up and hunt with us. A lot of the guys don't have the opportunity to get the level of education that we have, having done this full time for 30-some years. This is the occupation.
Yeah.
So it's nice to take an opportunity like this to give back to the guys a little bit and hopefully help them with their own hunting a little bit. And, nothing's rocket science. It's just the fact that we've done a bunch of it. And if we can give back to our brothers in bow hunting and sisters, of course, now there's a lot of great bow hunting girls in the sport now. And it's a pleasure to give back to a lot of the guys in the business.
Yeah. I think those guys will have captured it to the point that it's going to be pretty amazing. I can't wait to see the final product that comes out of that. But so a lot of things we're talking about here that's hard to articulate through the sound on a podcast. You can see some of the stand hanging methods and everything else that Jim was describing when that video launches, and I think that'll be through Sitka Gear if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, absolutely. It's with the Sitka crew, and I've worked with those guys for years, and it's a great relationship. I mean, I I'm a lot of reason I'm affiliated with the Sitka team is it's just a crew of very, very skillful individuals and focused and principled, and not to mention the fact that we've been working on the design of gear that is phenomenal for the sport that we love. And in this particular case, bow hunting big whitetails. It's just so complements the sport. It's exciting for us.
Yeah. And they haven't even gotten rid of you yet, even when you're a little bit hard on critiquing sometimes.
Yeah, I know. We were talking about that the other day. It's they seem to have a tolerance for me. I don't know what it is. I guess just bad judgment on their part.
I think that must be because if you don't know Jim, he's as straightforward as it gets.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Whatever he sees, what you get, and that's awesome and definitely needed for. I think they appreciate it from a gear testing perspective. You're not giving them any fluff, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, with the game that we play, we keep it very real. Getting back to my more intense side, I guess you might say, is we keep it very real, and we don't pretend that something is going to be when it's not going to be. If something's not quiet, it's not quiet. If something's not going to work, it's not going to work. I'm not speaking in terms of having all the answers. I'm just talking in terms of straight objectivity, I guess you might say, with respect to this is too noisy, this isn't going to work, this is the visual on this doesn't work. It's a matter of, I always say there's many ways. What do they say? There's many ways to skin a cat. Isn't that the saying?
Yeah, that's it.
And I respect people that run a successful anything. It doesn't have to be how I do it. I know a lot of guys that are great bow hunters in this industry, great bow hunting outfitters, great bow hunters, and I have a lot of respect for those guys. And we're not the same, but their formula is successful.
Yeah.
And that's really what we're focused on here.
Yep.
Is working on designs or working on gear, whatever it is, to on a successful track, positive track. So that's what we're focused on.
So if anyone wanted to potentially book a hunt with you, if we haven't scared them off or anything here yet, where could they do that or find more information on you?
Well, firstly, that would be bad judgment on their part. First, you know that.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing. I said the other day, there's nothing fun about this. Bow hunting big whitetails in cold weather and trying to manage your clothes. There's nothing fun about it. But
as you'll see in the film, trying to change in your underwear outside and it's 10 degrees.
Exactly. But I say it's not fun, but you wouldn't trade it for the world. I mean, there's one place that I'm going to be in November, and that's just it. And the Edmonton Bow Zone is home to me, so it's a special place. But I'm an easy guy to track down. I mean, my business is Classic Outfitters in Alberta, Canada, and I'm an easy guy to track down. So
you typed it in on Google, you'll find something.
Oh yeah, you'll find something. We've had articles for a long time and have been fortunate to do some TV stuff as well. And and
you keep it pretty close as far as there's not a lot of people that come through here in a year because you want to make sure everyone has a quality hunt, right?
Well, no, as a matter of fact, I mean, I've taken our client base way down, and I was kidding with the guys last night that we have the worst business plan ever because we just take a select few, and a lot of guys are trying to promote business and get more business, and we actually aren't doing that. We're taking very few people now after all these years. I think it's probably because the outfitter it can't take that much anymore. So so it's pretty funny. We were joking about how much longer I was going to last. So. But it's been a lot of fun for us, and we're very blessed. On a positive note, we're very blessed to have been in it. We're very blessed to have the people that come up, and my proudest thing in the world of outfitting is not the big deer we've taken. We've taken a bunch of them, but the people that are collected in the room, for lack of a better term, right now. We like to think we're a fairly quality crew. That's what we hope to be, but we seem to surround ourselves with a lot of quality, very, very accomplished people in a lot of different regards. So it's pretty exciting to be in the room with a lot of these guys.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's been an awesome week here and everything, and you don't hear it too often when someone's really not trying to promote themselves.
No, that's just it.
If you want to find out about it, here's my articles, but don't call me.
That's right. Yeah, like I said, that's just bad judgment on your part. But,
awesome.
No, that's just it. I mean, we've been doing this a long time, and we enjoy meeting some new people along the way. But it doesn't. It's certainly not for everyone what we do. It's a discipline challenging thing, and there's different ways to do it in different places that people like to be. And I think what we do, might be fairly obvious as we discuss this, but it's a regimented place for sure. And if you don't like regiment and organization and the reality of what the sport needs, if you like it, we're your guys. But if you're not, if you don't, we're not your guys.
Yeah. It's pretty clear. Just if you have any other questions, just give Jim a call and he'll let you know whether you're going to make it or not.
Yeah, the guys that are competitive and hard on themselves seem to just love it here, and they can't get enough of it.
I loved reading it in your rules, though. Just a quick side note was when you sent them over to me, the guidelines, I think it was, where it said, you may think something along the lines, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but something along the lines of, you may think you're a real man, but we'll figure out who the real men are in camp after day 3 or 4 or something.
Yeah, it was something along the lines that, and I've touched on this before, is you can think whatever you want of yourself and say whatever you want about yourself, but 2 or 3 or 4 days into it, if there's 6 guys in a room after 3 or 4 days, exactly what the other guys are. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter how much money you've had or what you've come from in terms of physical. It's ultimately what you are, and it starts to show your skills or your flaws after a few days. And we're not here to impress anybody. We're just here to try to stand strong for what we do and stand disciplined so we don't waste people's time. But it's interesting to see who fits and who doesn't.
Yeah, it's funny, and I'd see as you and I have talked a lot, that we have a lot in common from the standpoint that we get a little bit too obsessed over certain things, and it may take away from other parts of life. But that's
yeah. So not sure if that's a good bad habit or a bad good habit. I'm not sure which way that works, but
whatever way it is, that's what we have.
It's an obsession of some kind. Yes. Yeah.
But anyways, Jim, I wanted to thank you very much for coming on here and talking to me. And if there's anything else you'd like to add.
No, I think that's pretty good. That covers it. But I hope that helps maybe somebody that heard a thing or two that aids them with their own bow hunting, because we're all in this together, and hopefully that helps somebody along the line, and if not, entertains you. But good luck with your own bow hunting if anybody hears this, that it can help them out.
Yeah, so whether that's whether you decide to come to the Bow Zone sometime or it's anywhere else, I think you can get a lot out of this episode. So thanks, Jim. I really appreciate that, and I know you've had a long day of filming, and I've had a long day of hunting, so probably eat some more cinnamon rolls and go to bed.
Yeah, it sounds like a good plan. My pleasure, Bo. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.